All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. It's the State of the Nation. We're still talking about the Shakahola massacre, and then we get into the county's cash crunch in this conversation. We'd like to hear your views at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. I'll read some of them in just a bit. But yesterday, there was a conversation on the same issue we're talking about at the Senate. Listen.
This call for legislative framework for basic background checks. In the US, there's a big debate about basic background checks before somebody is able to purchase a firearm. I believe that the time has come. We don't need to politicize this thing because it has happened in the past. When people call for basic background checks for people establishing religious institutions, and people say, oh, you are attacking the church. Mr. Speaker, I want to find refuge and hide myself in Scripture, because in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 2 to 13, Mr. Speaker, there is criteria that is set by the New Testament, by the Bible itself, on leadership even in church. It says if you must be somebody with one wife, which knocks out a majority of the members, especially on the majority side. Mr. Speaker, you must be respectable, not drink excessively, which is a problem again in this house, or love money, Mr. Speaker. So some of these people you see on TV stations claiming to be preachers, but all they do is shout their M-Pesa pay bill numbers throughout the service. Mr. Speaker, is a red flag.
Without a select committee, you ask the police to investigate itself? What has happened in Kilifi is an indictment of the entire security system. So they'll use the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, as a cover-up. We need a committee that will unlock the mystery in Kilifi, but go further. Make recommendation on how we should deal with the church.
The arrested Mr. Mackenzie is not alone. He had a pastoral leadership. We want to see a strong hand of government to come actually crashing on this leadership of people who are out to finish the population in that area. So, Mr. Speaker, we are not speaking to something that is new. The government has a point to start with. They can go back and look at those suggestions by the Attorney General then were very, very good suggestions. And if those suggestions were implemented, cults like these ones will not be part of Kenyan society.
I'm here wondering what kind of frustrations and pains these people went to even as they died. Because, Honorable Speaker, I tend to think that some of them may have even been buried alive. Because how do you explain 5 or 6 members of a family? Is it a coincidence that even if they were fasting, they died at the same time? Honorable Speaker.
Yes, before that we were talking about this, and Marina was saying that you shouldn't have a blanket judgment for all the churches because this is an incident that happened in Shakahola. It should be dealt with as such.
You know, at least with Shakahola, the thing has already been unearthed. We know the consequences.
Yeah.
So you cannot say, let us focus there. We are saying we want to prevent another Shakahola. So spending time in Shakahola is not going to help us because that has already happened. What we need to do is to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And the problem I have with what my sister Veronica is saying is that no one is an expert. She is not an expert until this Shakahola massacre happened. This was a normal church to anyone. People are traveling there for prayers and they're saying this is normal, you know. So it is not as if there are no other churches right now that are telling people to fast. We've been told even in State House, people are being told to fast. Trevor, the objection we're having is not to say leaders should not go to church. We go to church all the time. We are saying the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution knew what they were saying when they said that there should be no state religion and the desire to separate state and religion. There is a reason. When you see people building altars at state institutions, yes, they decided that they're going to put an altar at the office of the deputy president, which is a national state institution. Those are the things we are saying should not happen because what it does, it communicates to everybody else that in fact the religion or the religious groups enjoy state power and state protection just by the fact of that proximity. And what we are saying is there should be no impression being created that there is a refuge in the state. If you are able to conduct whatever it is you are conducting is a church, there is no way of knowing, Trevor, where some of these things will end up. We see very ridiculous things. She herself has admitted that after what has happened in Shakahola, we are seeing all sorts of things on social media. People posting videos of pastors telling people to shake their phones until M-Pesa comes. You know, you just don't know. If you can be convinced, Trevor, today, that if you shake your phone like this 10 times, money will automatically come. It is only, that's what I'm saying. Just a minute, Trevor.
Yeah.
It is just a matter of time before you are convinced that you can starve yourself to death and meet Jesus. Because there is no logic. Once you remove that logic and then you put yourself in this so-called spiritual realm, you can be told to do anything. So the danger is, what are we supposed to learn from this Shakahola massacre? We are supposed to learn that it is possible, even in the most so-called established churches. And by the way, murder and massacre, as Khalwale has put it, are not the only crimes that are happening in the church. Yes, Shakahola is about mass murder. There have been incidents of child molestation, which is also a crime, a serious crime, Vero. So yes, that's what we are saying. That's what we are saying. So you cannot tell the country, you cannot tell us that we just focus on the mass murder in Shakahola. We are saying we should have a system that ensures that these things do not happen. We lawyers self-regulate. We have a law society of Kenya that regulates ourselves. We have a disciplinary committee that, in fact, if a lawyer misconducts themselves, they steal clients' money, you have a place for you to go. And then these practices are actually arrested. Okay. So all we're saying is, let us have this conversation devoid of this fear-mongering that we have, that, oh, immediately you ask for very basic minimum checks, they say you are attacking the church. Nobody's putting the church on the defense. We should have a right to question these things. As a Catholic myself, just last week, I also questioned a position that was taken by the Council of Bishops. My own Council of Bishops of the Catholic Church on their position on maandamano. So it is not as if we are not allowed to question decisions that the church is taking. It is what encourages encourages the growth of democracy and ensures that some of these practices are nipped in the bud.
All right, Khalwale, as we wind up on this conversation, where do we go from now?
You want to give me your minutes?
We need to move on.
Let me see if I'll have the minute.
Scratch, yeah.
I think there is something we should deal with.
Yeah.
In an oblique manner, Senator Sifuna has been bringing State House, State House, State House. Let's deal with it now.
Okay.
Even me, in Malinya, in my home, I invite the clergy. I say, today I will see 100 pastors. They come. So they then organize themselves how they will come, a group of 100 instead of all the 1,000 that could have come. So if it is true, I don't know, that you saw this character at State House, the president cannot take responsibility.
That's okay. But don't run away from don't run away from Mackenzie.
But don't mix the sit.
But this is the
can you hold my two colleagues
from Malinya finish? Because also even the clergy come to Malinya in your home.
Yes.
You have no way of telling whether some of them.
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. So now, Kenyans, I have no information that the man went to State House. I have information that the people who don't like the president very much, they are saying he went to State House. And State House is saying, no, it was a Photoshop.
Okay.
Be that as it may.
Yeah.
The point is, not just anybody can go to State House. To go to State House, you are cleared. So if this man had appropriated so much space for himself that he could even influence and get his way into State House,
it's dangerous.
The more reason.
Criminal.
Yes. So now, to my mind, we should now hold the conversation is how much regulation can you subject the church to? Because they are dangerous. My sister is saying this is a cult, and therefore it is bad. It has only become a cult after this discovery. For God's sake, for all these years, this was not a cult. It operated as the Good News International Church.
Yeah.
I mean, why are you running away from it? If you will allow me to speak about Yesu Watongaren, who is from our place, then also allow me to question people like Owor. I have seen that bishop given security akin to the security given to a head of state. Those are the conversations we are supposed to commit ourselves to if we are going to unlock this thing. You are not going to wait until things go out of hand is when you say we can now talk about it.
Okay.
Now that I've mentioned the war, I'm going to be bashed the whole day. But the truth is, we've also had stories of a professional lawyer who was asked to surrender her property so that she becomes ABCD. It may be just another manifestation of what is in Shakahola.
Okay.
Finally,
yeah,
but not least, it is not possible, nowhere, for a child to refuse to take water, for a child to refuse food. I look at my son, Ian. The first move he makes is to go where the fridge is. And you tell Ian can fast.
Unless you force it.
So we have to regulate these churches and tell them, if we find anybody asking a child at any time to fast, that person should be dealt with. This includes even the holy months of Ramadan.
Yeah.
It's wrong to ask children during Ramadan to fast. What does the child know about religion for him to be told you will wait until 5 to 5 before you eat?
All right. Maina, you had to clarify this issue around State House. But do you agree with the argument that whether it was in State House or not, there was no way to tell whether a preacher who's at State House was wayward or not unless there's proper regulation
never fully
to have people know that these are the operating standards?
And let me also say this. A church can start on a right trajectory, but somewhere along the way, it goes off. By the way, the difference between a religious institution, a genuine religious institution, and a cult is that the cult takes half the truth or 3/4 of the truth, distorts just a little. You will find in some, they will tell people, like if I quote the one in Texas, the one of Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, it sounds like a religious organization. But inside it, first it comes up with polygamy. It says a man can have like 20, 30 wives. It picks a certain doctrine, builds around it, makes it very secretive, removes them from people, and then they start taking advantage of their state of mind. But let me also say this, Trevor, because we are assuming that the church has no form of regulation. That's a wrong assumption. The church, just like companies in Kenya, has a form of regulation. It's registered under a certain act of parliament. Just like the way a company is registered in Kenya, you'll find Companies Act does the registration for companies, hosts the legislation, the legal mechanism through which you can register a company. The churches may be under the Societies Act. But let me say this. When a registrar of companies is having documents from the directors, they do not start to say, overscreen the directors and say, are they saying, are they going to commit acts of corruption? Are they doing what? On a first basis, they just register that company. True, not true, Senator Sifuna? It is true. So when a church presents its documentation and registers, it just gets the registration if it doesn't look like it's doing a purpose that is immoral or a purpose that is against the law. Now, when you go to certain institutions like PCA, because I can see maybe there are some people here who are not very church, even if they are indicating they have church, they need to know, for instance, let me use the Catholic Church. There is so much governance within the Catholic Church that if you walked into that institution and you ask them, how does one become a priest? They have a formalized way of how they check. If you go to PCA, within that church itself, you will be shocked, Trevor, that in these churches, when a pastor goes off, the correct churches, I'm not talking about the sects or the cults, when even a pastor, a man of God goes off, for instance, and is caught with, say, a woman who is not the wife or something like that, some are even made to confess in front of the congregation. And I have witnessed it in one of the churches. I will not state which, because I have been there and listened. What am I saying? That they will frown at anything that seems to go off what needs to be the correct doctrine. So let's not proceed from an assumption that churches are not self-regulated. The problem we have right now, we have other people who don't even have certification as churches, but they are running institutions. Then they come with some funny water and they tell people, you have to buy this for 5 bob. And I'm not here in this station to justify that coming from church. I am saying it is wrong.
Okay.
And I'm saying the massacre, there is no justification for this massacre that has happened at Shakahola.
Okay.
And I'm saying it is an issue of such big magnitude that to politicize this would be to miss the point.
Okay.
And we need to concentrate and see, do we have other tendencies in other institutions? Those institutions must be posed if it's already progressing into gross.
All right, let me take some feedback quickly, then get into the conversation around counties now in the cash crunch. They say they're going to grind to a halt and there's going to be a shutdown in counties. Just the other day, senators voted against the 417 billion shillings and now ended up with 385 billion, and they are the ones who are supposed to be in defense of the counties. We'll find out what the argument was at that time. Lillian says the state of the nation is the state of the church. We need to all take responsibility of the situation at hand. Who will stand to be counted as a contributor to the restoration of peace, love, and unity, as well as normalcy in present? Okay. Samuel says faith is good, but when we keep faith for too long, then injustice is constant, people will think we are blind. Okay. Namai Jane says, this idea of do not question the man of God is what is killing the capacity of most people to audit the teachings being delivered.
Yeah.
The most affected are the illiterate. It's time people learn the art of questioning. Okay? Ken Nyaminde says, Mackenzie's confidence is someone who knows they have backup. It's hard to believe that an atrocity of such magnitude could happen without the knowledge of a single person. Also, the laxity of the relatives of the victims is worrying. Sure. Okay. Asamoah says, you can't even sell drugs in a small kiosk without the knowledge of police officers. The Pastor Mackenzie was under police protection for that long.
Yes.
We must be honest and speak the truth. The intelligence agency failed. Sawe says, we learn from our failure. We have seen what happened. We will dwell more of who was wrong and forget the future. We have other cultic-like churches in operation. Let the government swing into action and govern the church operations. Okay? Kolo TM says, in a country where you cannot grow holy weed in your balcony flower vessels without the knowledge of the NIS and security apparatus, Pastor Mackenzie was able to kill hundreds of his followers without the knowledge of even a Nyumba Kumi elder.
It's worrying.
Ingela Lazaro says, where were the police and intelligence agencies? An individual can't manage to silently bury masses without burial permits or government knowledge, or this is just political diversion stories. Alex says, but how can a person be convinced by another human not to eat for days, yet the pastor himself is still having his meal? How can someone say you ban your academic certificates and you're following him? Something is wrong. Let all churches be investigated. All right, let's switch topics now and talk about the counties. And Boni Alwale, I'll start with you.